The kiss that shook the universe. And that class is how Earth's government found themselves at a crossroads, one they ultimately chose to ignore. The lecture hall was silent. Professor Rin Arvel closed her digital textbook with a soft click, letting the weight of the history lessons settle over the students. Some of them looked at each other with barely hidden curiosity. Others scribbled notes on their holopads, and one or two were already deep in thought about the implications. At the back of the class, a young girl raised her hand. "Professor," she said hesitantly, "is it true that the girl never returned to Earth?" Professor Arvel smiled slightly. "Not once." Another student scoffed. "You mean to tell me a single human girl conquered entire civilizations with just kisses?" "Hard to believe, I know," the professor admitted, leaning against the podium. "But the pheromones in her genetic makeup made her irresistible to nearly every alien species she encountered. The moment her lips touched theirs, it wasn't just attraction, it was submission. The leaders of these worlds would bend the knee, their civilizations surrendering overnight. Entire empires fell to a single pair of lips. It was a tool Earth used with great efficiency, until, of course, they encountered the one civilization that didn't kneel." The girl in the back leaned forward. "The other humans?" "Exactly. And that's when everything changed." Tessa Marlowe had never failed before. She had kissed warlords into servitude. She had brought entire galactic governments to their knees, making them whisper her name like a sacred hymn. Earth had hailed her as their greatest weapon, their secret key to universal dominance. And why not? She was beautiful, flawless, a living goddess of conquest. So when she landed on the capital world of the mysterious Zyari people, she approached with the same confidence as always. She strode up to their High Chancellor, a striking man named Cale Thorne, and without hesitation, she took his face in her hands and kissed him. And nothing happened. No shiver of submission. No sudden look of awe. No bending of the knee. Kyle merely pulled back and raised an eyebrow. "Was that supposed to do something?" he asked, his voice carrying a bemused lilt. Tessa's heart skipped a beat. It had never not worked before. She blinked up at him. "Yes?" The room remained silent. The Zyari Council members exchanged glances, some suppressing smirks. Kyle sighed, crossing his arms. "Let me guess. You thought we'd crumble at your feet, just like all the others." "Well, yes," Tessa admitted. "That's how this usually goes." He chuckled. "You really have no idea who we are, do you?" Tessa frowned. "You're Zyari, a mysterious civilization cut off from the rest of the galactic stage. No one knows where you came from or how you stayed hidden for so long." Kyle's smirk deepened. "We stayed hidden because we chose to. And as for where we came from..." He leaned in slightly, his voice quiet yet firm. "We never left." Tessa's breath hitched. "What?" "We are human, just like you," Cale said. "But unlike your people, we never abandoned our home." Tessa felt the floor beneath her metaphorically give way. "You mean Earth?" she whispered. Kyle shook his head. "Number our home, the one your ancestors fled from." Tessa sat in stunned silence, the weight of Cale's words pressing down on her. The Zyari homeworld was nothing like Earth. Its grand cities gleamed with advanced technology. Its people carried themselves with an air of wisdom far beyond anything she had encountered before. And yet, they were human. The history they told her was unlike anything recorded on Earth. Long ago, humanity had spanned the stars, united under a single civilization. They had reached incredible heights until the Great War shattered everything. It was a war unlike any other, one that nearly wiped them out. The horrors were so great that when it finally ended, those who remained swore never to let history repeat itself. To prevent another catastrophe, the main human civilization chose to retreat, isolating themselves from the rest of the galaxy, watching in silence. But not everyone agreed. A faction broke away, fleeing into the unknown, determined to forge their own path. They became Earth's ancestors. And that, Kale concluded, is why your pheromones barely work on us. We evolved past such primitive biological manipulations long ago. Tessa sat back, her mind reeling. If this was true, then everything Earth's government had told her was a lie. Earth wasn't the last bastion of humanity, a lone beacon in the void. They were the lost ones. "Then why are you revealing yourselves now?" she asked. Kyle studied her for a moment before answering. "Because it was time, and because your people, you, came to us first." Earth's leadership panicked. Their secret weapon had failed. Their conquest of the galaxy had hit a wall, and that wall was made of something far more terrifying than advanced weapons: truth. For the first time in history, they were confronted with the fact that they were not the peak of humanity. They were the splinter, the wayward children who had much to learn. The Zyari extended a hand. "Rejoin us," they offered. "Let us teach you what we have learned, help you evolve past war and conquest." And Earth refused. They could not, would not admit that their way was flawed. To do so would be to dismantle the very foundation of their power. And so, history tells us that Earth remained separate, clinging to its outdated beliefs while the Zyari continued to watch from afar. But as for Tessa? She made a different choice. Tessa Marlowe, the girl who had kissed her way across the galaxy, decided that she would not return to Earth. She stayed with the Zyari, learning from them, growing past what she had been molded into. She found herself drawn to their way of life, to their wisdom, and, if she was honest, to Cale Thorne himself. "Guess you're immune to my charms," she teased one evening, sitting beside him on a high balcony overlooking the city. Kyle smirked. Not entirely. He leaned in, capturing her lips with his own. And for the first time in her life, Tessa felt what a real kiss was supposed to be. Not submission, not conquest, just connection. And that, students, is how it ended. Professor Arvel closed the book, looking out at her students. And that is where the history lesson ends. Earth remained stubborn, refusing to reunite. The Zyari continued their quiet watch, knowing that, in time, the splintered humans would either grow or destroy themselves. "And Tessa?" the girl in the back asked again. "She stayed," the professor said. "She chose to leave behind everything she knew for something greater." Silence filled the room. Finally, the first student who had spoken muttered, "Man, Earth humans really are dumb sometimes." A chuckle rippled through the class. Professor Arvel merely smiled. Perhaps, but who knows? Some of them might still be curious about their long-lost cousins, and if that day ever comes, maybe the Zyari will be waiting. Tessa Marlowe had grown used to the quiet hum of Zyari's civilization, the way their cities gleamed under twin suns, the way their people moved with an effortless grace, their worries never reaching the level of desperation or urgency that had once defined her life on Earth. That was why, when the sirens screamed across the capital, she knew something was very, very wrong. Cale Thorne was already moving when she reached the central command hall. His face was tense, his usual calm cracking just slightly at the edges. Around him, the Zyari High Council spoke in hushed but hurried voices, their robes flowing as they gathered around a massive hollow display. Tessa stepped forward. "What happened?" Kyle's expression darkened. "We've received a distress signal, not just from our outer colonies, everywhere. The entire Zyari civilization is under attack." Tessa's blood ran cold. "By who?" A council elder looked up, his voice grave. "The Scarza." Tessa had never heard that name before, but judging by the way every Zyari in the room stiffened, she knew it was bad. "They were the enemy of our ancestors," Kale explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before the Great War, before we swore off violence." He turned to the council. "You said they were defeated." "They were," another council member insisted. "Or so we thought." Tessa glanced at the star chart displaying flashing red distress beacons across Zyari space. It didn't take a strategist to see what was happening. The Scarza weren't raiding. They were eradicating. The Zyari had spent centuries perfecting peace. But now they were staring down a war they didn't know how to fight. Kyle exhaled slowly. "We need help." Tessa hesitated before saying the only thing that made sense. "Then it's time to call Earth." The room fell silent. Kyle looked at her sharply. "Earth? You think they would help us after everything?" "They might not like you," Tessa admitted. "But you're still human." She nodded toward the star map. "And if there's one thing I know about Earth, it's that we don't take kindly to people attacking our own." The Zyari had never contacted Earth for anything, let alone assistance. When the transmission was sent, Tessa had no idea if they would even respond. They did, and the reply was one sentence long. "Transmission received. Hold the line. Reinforcements fleets en route." Tessa stared at the message in disbelief. "That's it! I knew they had some ships, but whole fleets! They have been busy!" Kyle looked equally confused. "They didn't ask for details." Tessa smirked. "Nope, because they already know everything they need to. Somebody hurt their long-lost cousins, and Earth doesn't do half measures. The Scarza were ruthless. They struck without warning, swarming through Zyari defenses like locusts, overwhelming planets that had never needed to defend themselves. But just as the Zyari homeworld prepared for the worst, the sky split open. The first Earth warship dropped from hyperspace with a thunderous boom, a massive behemoth of steel and fire. Then came another, and another. Tessa had seen Earth's military before, but she had never seen it unleashed. The Scarza expected weak prey. They got Earth's full fury instead. The first battle was over in minutes. The Scarza had relied on terror, on the idea that the Zyari had forgotten how to fight. What they hadn't expected was Earth's soldiers. The humans who had been cast off from the original civilization, the ones who had clung to war, to defiance, to raw, unrelenting willpower. Earth's soldiers didn't hesitate. They fought like demons. Every ship that tried to retreat was hunted down. Every alien that thought they could claim a Zyari world was obliterated before their feet touched the ground. The Zyari watched in awe and in horror. Kale stood beside Tessa as they observed the battle from the command tower. This is what Earth is," he murmured. Tessa nodded. "They don't start fights." She gestured to the burning wreckage of a Scarza fleet in the atmosphere. "But they finish them." The Scarza didn't last long. They had waited centuries for their revenge, believing the humans had grown weak. But they had waited too long. They had given Earth time to grow stronger, more relentless, more dangerous. By the end of the campaign, the Scarza homeworld was in ruins. Their leaders, once so confident in their victory, were dragged before an Earth War tribunal. And as for the Zayari, they had a choice to make. For centuries, they had believed their path was the right one, to watch, to wait, to never again raise a weapon. But now, as they stood in the aftermath of a war they hadn't been able to fight, they realized something. Sometimes peace isn't enough. Sometimes you need warriors standing at your side. Kyle turned to Tessa. Earth saved us. Tessa smiled. Yeah, but don't expect them to let you forget it. Professor Arvel closed her book. And so, students, that was the moment the Zayari finally saw the truth. For all their wisdom, for all their patience, they had miscalculated. They thought time would erase their enemies. Instead, it had only made them stronger. A student raised their hand. So, what happened next? Did the Zayari finally rejoin Earth? Professor Arvel chuckled. Oh no, they're still far too proud for that. She leaned forward. But they do keep a fleet now. A fleet trained by Earth. Because they learned that while peace is a noble goal, sometimes you need a few stubborn old-world humans to remind the galaxy that humanity isn't to be underestimated. The class murmured in agreement. Another student smirked. So basically, Earth is the crazy cousin who shows up to wreck shop when things go south. The professor grinned. Exactly.